The war had ended in silence. The battlefields that once burned with fire and noise were now only filled with drifting smoke and broken metal. Captain Ethan Cole stood on the bridge of his ruined ship, the Talon, watching the alien warships move in like dark shadows. His crew was gone, the systems were dead, and all he could do was wait. He had fought until the very last round of ammunition, refusing to surrender even when defeat was certain. That was what it meant to be human. The Zelthari ship surrounded the wreck of the Talon with perfect precision. Their vessels were smooth, silver, and alive with strange light. When the boarding pods broke through the hull, Ethan did not resist. He stood firm, his uniform torn and blood-stained, his eyes steady. The aliens who stepped inside were tall and graceful, their faces calm but cold. They spoke in a language that carried both music and command. One of them pointed a weapon at Ethan, and he raised his hands without a word. He was taken aboard their capital ship, Valthraxis. It was enormous, like a floating city of glass and steel. Inside, everything glowed faintly blue, and the air felt too clean, too perfect. Ethan was brought to a large chamber filled with alien guards. At the far end stood the Zelthari queen herself, seated upon a throne of white crystal. Her eyes were like liquid silver, sharp and emotionless. Around her stood her advisors, soldiers, and her daughter, the princess Lysara. Ethan had expected hatred or cruelty, but what he found was something colder. The queen looked at him as though she was studying a strange animal. She spoke in her smooth alien tongue, and a translator droned beside her repeated the words in a mechanical voice. "You are the leader of this human vessel?" Ethan straightened. "I was," he said quietly. "You fought with persistence," the queen said. "Even when logic dictated your defeat, why?" "Because surrender was not an option," Ethan answered. "We fight for what we believe in, even when we know we might lose." There was a murmur among the aliens, a ripple of confusion. To them, logic was everything. Fighting without a chance to win made no sense. The queen's expression did not change, but her daughter tilted her head slightly, her silver eyes curious. Lysara had never seen a human before. She had read about them, primitive, emotional, reckless. But this one stood unshaken before the throne of his conqueror. He was not what she expected. The queen gave an order. "He will be taken to the lower cells. He is to be studied." Ethan was dragged away by the guards, his wrists bound by light restraints. As he walked through the shining corridors, he saw the world of the Zelthari. Everything was built with beauty and precision, but there was no warmth in it. No laughter, no life beyond order. He realized then why they called humans chaotic. To them, emotion was disorder. Yet he could not help but think that maybe it was what made humans strong. His cell was clean and silent. A small light glowed in one corner, and a strange mist filled the air to keep it breathable for both species. Days passed, though he could not tell how many. The aliens brought him food, nutrient paste that had no taste, and asked endless questions through their machines. They wanted to know about human strategy, technology, and history. Ethan answered little. He was tired, but he would not betray his people. Then one day the door to his cell opened, and instead of guards it was her, the princess. Lysara stepped inside quietly. She wore a long silver robe that shimmered when she moved. In her hands she carried no weapon. Her eyes studied him not as an enemy, but as a mystery. "You do not fear us," she said, her voice soft but clear. Ethan looked up from the corner where he sat. "Fear doesn't help," he replied. "It only gives power to the wrong side." Lysara tilted her head again, curious. "Your species lost. Yet you speak as if you have won something." "Maybe we did," he said. "Sometimes losing doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you stood for something worth losing for." She had never heard words like that before. Among the Zelthari, loss was shame. Victory was everything. But the human spoke of defeat as if it had honor in it. She sat down across from him, her silver robe brushing against the floor. "Why did your kind fight us? You must have known we were stronger." "Because strength isn't everything," Ethan said quietly. "You can have all the power in the galaxy, but if you use it to crush others, you'll only rule over ashes." Lysara looked away, her expression thoughtful. The human's words echoed in her mind long after she left the cell. Over the following days, she returned again and again. She asked him questions, not about weapons, but about Earth. He told her about blue skies, oceans, music, and laughter. He spoke of how humans argued, dreamed, and built things even when they knew time would take it all away. He spoke of friendship and love, words that had no direct translation in her language. One day she brought him a small object, a crystal that glowed faintly when touched. "This is from my homeworld," she said. "It sings when it feels life." She placed it in his hands and the crystal shimmered brighter. Her eyes widened slightly. "It never reacted to me like that." Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe it likes humans. Or maybe," she said quietly, "it feels something we have forgotten." Their meetings remained secret. Lysara told no one, not even her mother. But the guards noticed her visits and whispers began to spread through the palace. They said the princess was curious about the human prisoner, that she looked at him differently. Some said she was losing the cold pride of her people. Ethan, meanwhile, began to see the loneliness behind her calm face. She was born into power, yet she lived in a world without choice. Her every move was watched, her every word measured. He realized she was as much a prisoner as he was. Only her cage was made of duty instead of walls. One evening, she asked him a question that caught him off guard. "If you could escape, where would you go?" He thought for a long moment. "Anywhere," he said at last. "As long as I could be free." Lysara lowered her gaze. "Freedom," she repeated softly, as if tasting the word for the first time. "It is a strange idea." "To humans, it's everything," Ethan said. "Without it, we're not living." The sound of footsteps broke the silence. Lysara stood quickly, her calm mask returning. The door opened and 2 guards entered. They looked suspiciously at her and then at Ethan. She turned to them with royal authority in her voice. "Leave us. I am not finished." The guards hesitated, then obeyed. When they were gone, she turned back to Ethan. "They are watching me," she whispered. "I do not know how long I can continue this." "Then don't risk yourself," he said. "They'll punish you." Lysara looked at him for a long time, her silver eyes shimmering. "You worry for me," she said quietly. "Even though I am your captor." Ethan gave a tired smile. "You're not my enemy, Lysara. You just don't know what side you're on yet." When she left that night, she walked the long corridor back to her chambers, her heart unsteady. The stars outside the windows seemed different somehow, colder, emptier. She thought of the human's defiance, his strange warmth, and the way he spoke of things her people had forgotten. For the first time in her life, the princess of the Zelthari Empire began to question everything she had been taught. And deep within the silent cell of the Valthraxis, Captain Ethan Cole looked up at the faint light above him and whispered, "Humans don't bow." His words were small in the vast ship, but somehow they carried far. Days turned into weeks aboard the massive ship Valthraxis. The stars outside never seemed to change, and time felt like a slow circle. Captain Ethan Cole had stopped counting the days in his cell. The guards came and went, bringing food or asking questions, but his answers stayed the same, short and careful. He had learned that silence could be stronger than words, yet not every visit was cold and routine. Sometimes, when the corridor was quiet and no one was watching, the door would slide open and Lysara would enter. She always came without guards, her steps light, her face calm. The guards might have wondered why the princess wasted her time on a human prisoner, but none dared question her directly. When she entered, the air always seemed to change. The silence felt less heavy. Ethan had learned to expect her visits, though he never said so. One day she brought something with her, a small glowing orb that floated between her hands. "This will let you see Earth again," she said. "Not the real one, but what our records captured before the war." The orb floated higher and projected an image. The blue planet appeared before him, whole and shining, surrounded by the black of space. For a moment, Ethan forgot the walls around him. He saw oceans, clouds, and sunlight. He saw home. Lysara watched his expression carefully. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "I did not think a world so full of color could exist." Ethan's voice was quiet. It was more than color. It was noise, life, and chaos. We argued, fought, and dreamed all at once. It was messy, but it was ours. She turned to look at him. "And now it is lost," he nodded slowly. "Maybe not forever. As long as one of us remembers it, it's not gone." Lysara thought about his words. The Zelthari remembered things differently. To them, memory was only data, kept perfect and cold in their archives. But humans remembered with feelings. They carried pain and hope together, never cleanly separated. For the first time, Lysara wished to understand what it meant to feel that way. She began to ask him questions about how humans loved, about why they laughed, and why they risked their lives for others. Each time Ethan tried to explain, but some things could not be described in words. So he told her stories. He spoke about a friend who stayed behind on a doomed ship to save others. He told her about a child he once rescued from a collapsing colony dome. He described how humans helped each other even when there was no reward. Lysara listened quietly, her silver eyes wide. "Among my people," she said, "we do not risk ourselves for others. It is seen as weakness. Duty is all that matters." Ethan gave a small smile. "Then maybe duty needs a heart." She looked confused. "A heart? Not the organ," he said, pointing to his chest. "The feeling. It's what makes duty mean something." Lysara thought about that for a long time. Her people obeyed the queen without question, followed rules older than their own stars. But now, for the first time, she wondered if something was missing from all their perfection. Their meetings continued in secret. The guards began to notice, but they stayed silent, afraid of questioning royal orders. Still, whispers grew stronger in the palace halls. Advisors began to report to the queen that her daughter was showing too much interest in the prisoner. One evening, Lysara entered the cell looking uneasy. Her usual calm was gone, replaced by worry. "My mother has begun to ask questions," she said softly. "She wants to know why I visit you." Ethan looked up from the bench where he sat. "What did you tell her?" "That I study you for diplomatic reasons," she said. But she did not believe me. "She believes you are dangerous," he gave a quiet laugh. "I'm a broken soldier in a locked room. I don't look dangerous to me." "You are," she said firmly. "You are dangerous because you speak of things that make others think. That is something our kind fears." Ethan looked at her carefully. "And what about you? Do you fear it?" Lysara met his eyes. "I don't know. But when you speak, I feel something new. It makes me question who I am." He said nothing, but he could see the struggle behind her calm face. She was torn between two worlds, one of cold order and one of feeling. The sound of the ship's engines filled the silence between them. Outside, distant stars drifted past the window like slow-moving embers. After a while, Lysara said, "There is something I must show you." She touched a device on her wrist, and a holographic image filled the air. A map of Zelthari space. "This is what we control," she said. "Thousands of worlds. And yet none of them feel like home." "Not to me." Ethan looked at the vast map. "Maybe home isn't a place. Maybe it's the people you choose." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment too long, then she turned away. "You speak as if you believe that even after everything we did to your kind." "I have to," he said. "If I stop believing that, then the war really did destroy everything." She turned the hologram off, the blue light fading. "You are strange, human." "I've heard that before," he said, smiling faintly. When she left that night, she looked back once before the door closed. Ethan watched the light fade from the corridor and knew that something had changed between them. The next day, his routine changed. The guards who usually brought food seemed tense. They avoided his gaze and spoke little. He sensed something was coming. Later that evening, Lysara came again, but she looked frightened. "My mother has ordered a meeting," she said. "She wants to question you before the council." Ethan frowned. "Why?" "She believes you are trying to corrupt me," she whispered. "She thinks you are filling my mind with human ideas." Ethan gave a small sigh. "Maybe I am. But they're just ideas, Lysara. They can't hurt anyone. To my people they can," she said. "Ideas change everything. They break order." She reached out, hesitating, then placed her hand gently on his arm. Her skin was cool, almost metallic, but the gesture was human enough to make him pause. "Promise me you will not anger her," she said. "If you defy her in the council, she may destroy you." "I can't lie," Ethan said quietly. "But I'll try not to make things worse." Lysara's eyes softened. "I will stand beside you when she questions you." "Won't that put you in danger?" he asked. "Perhaps," she said, "but some truths are worth the risk." That night Ethan could not sleep. He stared at the faint light above him, thinking of what might come. He was ready for pain, for death, but not for the strange connection that had grown between him and the alien princess. He thought of her curiosity, her quiet kindness, and the way her voice softened when she spoke of Earth. She had begun to see humans as more than enemies. And though he did not fully understand it, he felt a deep respect for her, a bond formed not by romance but by understanding. When the morning came, guards arrived earlier than usual. They told him to stand, bound his wrists again, and led him through the long, shining halls toward the throne chamber. The air was colder than before. Hundreds of alien eyes followed him as he was brought before the queen. Lysara was already there, standing beside her mother. Her expression was calm, but her hands were clenched tightly behind her back. The queen's voice filled the chamber. "Human," she said, "you have spoken much with my daughter. You have filled her thoughts with chaos. Tell me, what do you want from her?" Ethan looked up at the tall, glowing figure. "Nothing," he said simply. "I only answered her questions." The queen's eyes narrowed. "Do you deny that you are trying to influence her? To weaken her loyalty?" "I didn't ask her to change," he said. "She did that on her own. Maybe she just started seeing things differently." A quiet gasp moved through the court. No one had ever spoken to the queen like that before. Lysara stepped forward quickly. "Mother, please," but the queen raised her hand. "Enough," her voice cut through the air like a blade. "You will not speak, Lysara. You will listen and learn what happens to those who defy order." Ethan stood silently, his heart steady. He knew this moment would come. Yet as the queen's cold gaze fixed on him, he could not help but glance at Lysara. Their eyes met for a brief second, and in that small moment, without words, a promise passed between them. No matter what happened next, they both knew something had already changed forever. And for the first time in her life, the alien princess realized she no longer feared her mother's judgment as much as she feared losing the human who had taught her to feel. The throne chamber was filled with silence so deep that even the humming of the ship seemed to vanish. Every Zilthari in the room stood still, waiting for the queen's next command. Her silver eyes were cold, unblinking, and fixed on Ethan. She looked at him not as a man, but as something that needed to be erased. Lysara stood beside her mother, her hands trembling slightly behind her back. She wanted to speak again, to defend the human, but one look at the queen's face stopped her. Her mother's anger was not loud, it was worse. It was silent and sharp. "Human," the queen said at last, her voice smooth but filled with power. "Your kind is chaos. You destroy, you resist, and you refuse to learn order. Tell me why you continue to fight even when there is no hope." Ethan lifted his head. His hands were bound, but his eyes were clear. "Because hope isn't something we wait for," he said. "It's something we make." A murmur spread through the court. The queen frowned. "You speak nonsense. Hope does not build ships. Hope does not win wars." Ethan shook his head. "No, but without it we stop trying." Lysara's gaze flickered toward him, pride rising in her chest. The queen noticed it instantly. "You seem fascinated by this creature," she said coldly, turning to her daughter. "Why?" Lysara hesitated. "Because he is different. Because he speaks of things we have forgotten." "Forgotten?" The queen's tone grew harder. "We have forgotten nothing. We are perfection. We are logic. Emotion is weakness. Compassion leads to ruin. Then why does it feel wrong?" Lysara whispered. "Why does his weakness make me feel stronger?" The entire court fell silent. The queen's expression froze, then darkened. "You dare to question me?" she asked. Lysara took a step forward. "I question what I see. This human, he is not like what our books described. He does not beg. He does not break. Even when he is defeated, he still stands." Ethan looked at her, surprised by her courage. The queen rose from her throne slowly, the light around her dimming with her anger. "Enough," she said. "You shame your bloodline, Lysara. You let a creature of chaos poison your mind. You forget who you are." Lysara's voice trembled but did not fail. "No, mother. For the first time I remember who I am." The queen's fury filled the room. She raised her hand and the guard stepped forward. "Take the human. He will be executed at dawn. His body will be burned and his name erased." Lysara's heart dropped. "No," she cried. She turned to the queen, her voice shaking. "Please don't do this." The queen's eyes flashed. "You will be confined to your chambers until you learn respect." The guards surrounded Ethan. He did not resist as they grabbed his arms and began to drag him away. But before he was taken through the door, he met Lysara's eyes one last time. He didn't say anything, but she understood. It wasn't fear she saw in him. It was peace, as if he had already accepted whatever came next. That calmness broke something inside her. The queen turned away and sat back on her throne. "This meeting is over," she said coldly. "Let this be a lesson to all who question the order of the empire." The crowd began to disperse, whispering among themselves. None dared look at the princess, who stood frozen in place. Only when the chamber was empty did Lysara finally move. She turned and walked quickly through the corridors, her thoughts racing, her heart pounding. She reached her private room and locked the door behind her. For a long moment she stood still, breathing hard. The walls around her seemed to close in. Everything she had believed in, her people's pride, her mother's power, her own duty, felt small and hollow. She sat down, pressing her hands against her face. She saw Ethan's calm eyes in her mind, heard his voice telling her about courage and choice. She realized that if she did nothing, he would die for the crime of being human, for the crime of making her feel. She stood up. Her decision was sudden and clear. She could not let him die. That night, the corridors of the Valthraxis were quieter than usual. The guards had changed shifts, and only a few patrolled the lower decks. Lysara walked through the halls in silence, wearing a dark cloak to hide her face. She carried a small data crystal in her hand, one that held the override codes for the prison locks. When she reached the detention sector, 2 guards stood at the entrance. She forced herself to appear calm. "You will let me through," she said. Her voice carried royal command, and the guards immediately stepped aside, bowing their heads. She entered and walked down the narrow corridor of cells until she reached the last one. Inside, Ethan sat quietly, his back against the wall, his wrists still bound. When he saw her, his expression was calm but surprised. "Princess," he said softly, "you shouldn't be here." "I came to fix what I broke," she said. She held up the crystal and pressed it against the door's panel. The energy field flickered and vanished. Ethan stood slowly. "You're going to get yourself killed." Lysara shook her head. "Not if we leave before dawn. There's a small craft in the east hangar. It's not guarded. We can escape through the asteroid belt." "We?" he repeated, shocked. "You're coming with me?" "Yes," she said firmly. "If I stay, I will become what my mother is. I can't let that happen." For a moment, Ethan didn't know what to say. He had fought battles, faced death, and lost everything he cared about. But no act of courage he had ever seen compared to this. An alien princess risking her life for a human. "All right," he said finally. "Let's go." They moved through the halls quickly, keeping to the shadows. Lysara used her royal codes to disable security systems as they passed. The ship was so large that the sounds of alarms in one section would take minutes to reach another. Still, every step felt heavy with danger. When they reached the hangar, the bay doors were sealed, but Lysara unlocked them with her codes. The craft she had chosen was small, just big enough for 2 people. Its design was elegant, shaped like a silver arrow. As they prepared to board, the sound of boots echoed behind them. A group of guards had spotted them. "Stop!" one of them shouted. Ethan turned and saw several energy rifles pointed their way. Without thinking, he grabbed a fallen piece of equipment and threw it at the nearest power console. Sparks flew and the lights flickered. "Go!" he shouted. Lysara climbed into the pilot's seat and started the engines. "Hurry!" Ethan jumped inside as energy blasts hit the walls around them. The hangar doors began to open, revealing the endless black of space. The small craft shot forward, flames bursting from its thrusters. The Valthraxis loomed behind them like a silver mountain. Within moments, several fighter ships launched in pursuit. Ethan took control of the navigation. "Head for that asteroid field," he said. "It'll block their sensors." Lysara nodded, her hands moving quickly across the controls. The ship dove into the dense field of spinning rocks and dust. Explosions of light followed as the enemy ships fired blindly into the asteroids. Ethan's human instincts guided them through the chaos, dodging, weaving, and using debris as cover. Lysara glanced at him in awe. "You fly like you can see the future," she said. "Just guessing fast," he replied with a grin. After several tense minutes, the radar cleared. The pursuing ships had lost them. The small craft drifted behind a large asteroid, hidden from view. The engines went quiet, and only the sound of their breathing filled the cabin. For the first time since leaving the prison, Lysara let herself breathe deeply. "We did it," she whispered. Ethan looked at her, his expression soft. "You didn't have to do this. You gave up everything." She shook her head. "I didn't give up anything worth keeping." Outside, the stars burned silently. Somewhere far behind them, the Queen would soon realize what her daughter had done. The Empire would not let them go easily. But for now, in the quiet dark of space, there was freedom. Lysara turned to look at him. "What now?" Ethan smiled faintly. Now we find a place to start again. She looked out the window at the endless stars. For the first time in her life, the galaxy felt wide and alive. And beside her, the human who refused to bow had become more than a prisoner. He was proof that even in a universe ruled by logic, a spark of heart could change everything. The small craft drifted silently through the black expanse of space. Asteroids passed on all sides, massive stones of gray and brown spinning slowly, untouched by life for millennia. Lysara kept her hands steady on the controls, her eyes scanning the instruments. Ethan sat beside her, leaning forward, alert to every movement, every distant flash of light. Neither spoke at first. The quiet was heavy, yet it felt good. A break from the tension and fear of the last days. After a while, Lysara finally spoke. "We have to find a safe place. Somewhere no one will recognize us." Ethan nodded. "There are scattered human colonies in this sector, abandoned after the war. We can start there. Your people?" she asked, glancing at him. "Do they even exist anymore?" "Some survived," he said quietly. "Hiding, scattered, hoping to rebuild. That's what humans do. We keep going no matter how impossible it seems." Lysara studied his face. There was a calm determination in him that she had never seen in anyone else. The Zelthari always acted from order, strategy, and fear. Humans acted from hope and courage, two things that were rare among her people. She realized then that this human, who had been captured and defeated, had a strength unlike any warrior she had ever known. Hours passed as they navigated through the asteroid belt. Ethan guided the ship, spotting small gaps between massive rocks and plotting their path carefully. Lysara's hands moved with skill, keeping the craft steady and fast. She noticed that when they worked together, their actions seemed to anticipate each other. It was almost as if the ship moved on instinct, guided by their combined effort. Eventually, they reached the outskirts of a small, forgotten system. A planet came into view, covered in forests and oceans, mostly untouched by civilization. Ethan's heart lifted. "This is it," he said. "This will do for now." Lysara slowed the craft as they entered orbit. From above, the planet looked alive, full of color and light, a stark contrast to the cold metallic surfaces of the Valthraxis. She felt something she could not explain, a calm, almost aching familiarity in the way the planet seemed to breathe. They landed on a flat plain surrounded by trees, the engines kicking up dust and small stones. The ship settled with a gentle thud. Ethan immediately unstrapped himself and checked the surroundings. Lysara followed, stepping down carefully, her silver eyes wide as she took in the forest around them. "It's peaceful here," she whispered. "I can't remember the last time I felt peace." Ethan smiled faintly. "It's been a long time since I did too." They set up a temporary camp near the ship, using the small tools Lysara had brought from the craft. Ethan worked quickly, erecting simple structures to store supplies and provide shelter. Lysara helped, though she was unfamiliar with many of the human techniques. Yet she learned quickly, imitating his movements with focus. Watching him, she began to understand why humans survived in the galaxy despite their weaknesses. They adapted, learned, and never stopped moving forward. As the sun set, painting the sky in oranges and purples, Ethan and Lysara sat near the small fire they had built. The warmth was comforting, and for the first time the tension of the escape faded slightly. "You didn't tell me," Lysara said softly, "how you survived the battles before being captured. Your people didn't have much left, did they?" Ethan looked into the fire, the shadows flickering across his face. "We survived because we refused to give up. Every colony, every ship, every person who could still fight kept going. Even when the odds were against us, we tried. That's all humans ever do, try, and hope that trying is enough." Lysara listened, fascinated. "It's strange. Your hope doesn't seem weak. It seems strong." "Because it is," Ethan said. "Hope doesn't make you invincible, but it makes you keep standing when everyone else falls." The princess sat quietly for a while, watching the flames. "I never understood courage before," she admitted. "Among my people, courage is measured by strength, by obedience, by following the rules." You fight even when the rules tell you not to." Ethan nodded. "Sometimes the rules are wrong. Sometimes standing for what is right matters more than anything else." Lysara considered his words, feeling their weight in a way that her people had never taught her. She realized that order and rules alone could not create a full life. Something was missing, something that humans had. and that her mother's empire lacked entirely. The next morning, Ethan and Lysera explored the surrounding area, mapping safe paths and hidden spots in case the Valthraxes discovered their location. The forests were alive with the sounds of birds and insects, and small streams ran through the valleys, clear and sparkling. Lysera felt a quiet joy she had never known before. She even laughed, a soft sound, when Ethan slipped into a shallow stream while trying to test its depth. "You're clumsy," she teased, though her voice carried no real accusation. Ethan stood, brushing himself off. "You try surviving war with humans and then tell me clumsy," he said with a grin. "It's part of being alive." Lysera shook her head, smiling faintly. "I think I'm beginning to understand what you mean by alive." As days passed, their routine continued. They explored, gathered food, and repaired the craft to ensure it could move again if necessary. Lysera absorbed everything Ethan taught her, the ways humans adapted, the importance of choice, and the strength found in loyalty and trust. One evening, as they sat watching a sky full of stars, Lysera asked quietly, "Do you think my mother will ever stop hunting us?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Not unless she learns something new. And she won't. She has never had to change before. But maybe you can show her a different path through example." Lysera was silent, staring at the stars. "I want to," she said finally, "but it will not be easy." "No," Ethan agreed, "but nothing worth doing ever is." Over the following days, Lysera began to take on more responsibility. She learned to move quietly through the forests, track small animals, and find fresh water. Ethan watched her closely, impressed by her speed and intelligence. Unlike many of his people, who had learned survival through experience, Lysera was learning it with purpose, with thought, and with courage. One afternoon, while surveying the land from a small hill, they spotted a ship in orbit above the planet. The markings identified it as a Zilthari reconnaissance vessel. Ethan immediately went to work, plotting how they could evade detection. Lysera watched him, noticing his calm focus. He didn't panic, didn't shout orders. He simply observed, calculated, and acted. "This is what I mean," Ethan said, pointing at the instruments. "Humans survive because we keep our heads clear, even when everything is falling apart. We make choices that matter." Lysera nodded, absorbing his words. "I think I understand." The reconnaissance ship eventually moved on, leaving them in peace once again. That night, as they sat near their small fire, Lysera reached out and touched Ethan's arm. "Thank you," she said softly, "for showing me all of this, for giving me a choice." Ethan looked at her, surprised by the quiet sincerity. "You don't need to thank me. You're the one who chose to see it." Lysera smiled faintly, feeling a warmth that was entirely new. She realized that her bond with Ethan had grown far beyond teacher and student. He had shown her a world she never knew existed, a world of courage, hope, and freedom. "I won't let them take you back," she whispered. "I won't." Ethan's expression softened. "I don't doubt it. But freedom isn't just about escaping. It's about living with the choice you made." They sat in silence, listening to the gentle rustle of the forest and the distant calls of creatures stirring in the night. For the first time in both their lives, they were free. Not because no one was chasing them, but because they had chosen to be together, to trust each other, and to survive. And somewhere in the distance, among the stars and silent void, the Valthraxis waited. Its queen had been told what had happened, and soon Lysera and Ethan would have to face the consequences of their defiance. But for now they could breathe, laugh, and dream. For now they were alive, and that was enough. The days that followed were tense but full of purpose. Ethan and Lysera worked side by side, reinforcing their hidden camp, scouting the planet, and preparing for the possibility that the Valthraxis might return. They learned to move quietly, to signal to each other without words, and to anticipate danger. The bond between them had grown stronger than either had expected, built on trust, respect, and the shared understanding of survival. Lysera still thought about her mother constantly. The queen would not let this act of defiance go unpunished. The empire's reach was vast, and the human captain had become a symbol not only of resistance but also of her daughter's choice to embrace life and hope over rigid order. One evening, Ethan was repairing the craft systems while Lysera studied the terrain from the small hill above their camp. The sky was painted in shades of violet and orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. The soft hum of the forest seemed almost alive, carrying a calmness neither had felt in years. Do you think she'll come? Lysara asked quietly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Ethan did not look up from his work. If she does, we'll be ready. But it won't be like before. She will expect an obedient daughter, not someone who has learned courage and choice. Lysara smiled faintly. I'm not afraid anymore. Ethan finally looked at her, meeting her eyes. That's good. Fear can be useful, but courage changes everything. They worked in silence, both reflecting on what had brought them here. Ethan thought of the battles he had fought, the crew he had lost, and the world he had left behind. Lysara thought of her life in the palace, the rigid expectations and the cold perfection of her people. In each other, they had found something they never expected: hope. The following morning, signs of movement appeared in orbit above the planet. Sylthari ships glinted in the sunlight, scanning the planet below. Ethan and Lysara quickly gathered their gear and prepared the craft. They could not stay here. They needed a new plan. Where will we go? Lysara asked, her hands steady on the controls. Ethan pointed toward a small cluster of asteroids in a nearby system. We'll use them to hide. From there we can reach one of the outer colonies. There are humans and alien dissidents scattered across that sector. We can build something new together. Lysara nodded, determination shining in her eyes. Then we leave now. The craft lifted off smoothly, cutting through the forest canopy and soared into space. The Sylthari ships in orbit began to react, but Ethan's navigation through the asteroid cluster made detection difficult. Lysara followed his lead, trusting his instincts completely. The ship twisted and turned between massive floating rocks, evading scanners and patrols. Hours later, they reached a hidden pocket in the asteroid field, a natural shelter among the massive stones. Ethan guided the ship into a small cave-like area, carefully parking it in shadows where it would remain unseen. Lysara looked out at the void, her silver eyes reflecting the countless stars. This will do for now, Ethan said. We can rest and plan the next move. Lysara smiled faintly. We've come far already. Ethan turned to her. Not far enough. The Empire won't stop until they get what they want, but we can build something stronger than fear. We can show them that humans are not weak, that hope is a force they cannot control. She looked at him, feeling the weight of his words. And you trust me to stand with you? Always, Ethan said simply. In the days that followed, they began to make contact with scattered human survivors and alien dissidents who had been hiding from the Empire. Messages sent carefully and secretly brought responses. Small groups began to gather on distant, hidden worlds. People who had lost everything found hope in the stories Ethan and Lysara shared. The human spirit, combined with the intelligence and strategy of alien allies, created a network that grew quietly but steadily. Lysara herself became a symbol. Stories of the princess who defied her mother and saved a human captain spread across the galaxy. Her courage inspired others to question the rigid rules they had lived under for centuries. She taught them the lessons Ethan had shared with her, that bravery, loyalty, and hope were stronger than fear, and that life was more than obedience and power. One night, while they watched the stars from the asteroid shelter, Ethan spoke quietly. Do you think your mother understands yet? Lysara shook her head. She may never understand, but maybe she will see it eventually. Maybe she will see that power isn't everything, and that life is meant to be lived, not ruled with fear. Ethan smiled faintly. Even if she doesn't, we've done something important. We've chosen to live fully, and we've shown others it can be done. As they sat together, the distant hum of the galaxy around them, Lysara realized that everything she had known about herself and her people had changed. She had found strength she never thought she had, courage she never knew existed, and a bond with a human who had taught her that life was more than rules. Suddenly, a message arrived through a secure channel. It was from one of the outer colonies, a group of humans and dissidents requesting guidance and protection. Ethan and Lysara exchanged a glance. This was it, their chance to turn their small victory into something greater. Let's go, Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. There's work to do. Lysara nodded, determination bright in her eyes. Together, they left the safety of the asteroid shelter, their craft moving silently toward the distant colony. As they traveled, they prepared messages to spread across the hidden sectors, calling survivors to unite. The galaxy was wide and dangerous, but with courage, trust, and hope, even the smallest spark could ignite a revolution. Back on the Valthraxis, The queen had learned of their escape and the growing network of allies forming around them. She sat on her throne, silent, staring into the void beyond the palace windows. Her daughter had defied her. The human had survived, and whispers of rebellion were growing. For the first time in her long life, the queen felt uncertainty. She realized that the human she had once dismissed as weak had become a symbol of strength, and that Lysera had learned something her mother had never understood. That true power comes from choice, courage and heart, not fear. Meanwhile, Ethan and Lysera arrived at the hidden colony. They were greeted by a small group of humans and dissidents, their faces filled with hope and relief. The survivors quickly adapted to the leadership of the unlikely pair. Ethan guided them in rebuilding, teaching strategy and survival, while Lysera shared her knowledge of the Zelthari and their technology. Together, they began to forge a community based on trust, loyalty, and cooperation. A place where humans and aliens could work side by side without fear. Over weeks, the settlement grew. Gardens bloomed, small machines hummed, and laughter returned to a world that had almost forgotten it. The humans and alien allies learned from each other, discovering new ways to thrive and defend themselves. And at the center of it all, Ethan and Lysera stood side by side, proof that courage and hope could cross even the widest divide. One evening, Lysera stood on a small hill overlooking the colony. Ethan joined her, and together they watched the sun sink below the horizon. "Do you think we can really change things?" she asked softly. Ethan smiled. "We already have. One choice, one act of courage can change the path of many lives. And we've made that choice together." Lysera looked at him, her silver eyes shining. "Then we continue. No matter what comes next," Ethan nodded. "No matter what." As the stars appeared one by one in the sky above, Lysera realized that she had chosen a new life, not one dictated by fear or power, but by freedom, hope, and trust. She had chosen to stand for something greater than herself, and somewhere far across the galaxy, the Empire watched, unable to destroy the strength of humans, the courage of a princess, and the hope they had inspired. For the first time in centuries, the Zelthari learned that even the smallest spark could not be controlled. Ethan took Lysera's hand gently. "You see," he said quietly, "hope is stronger than fear. That's what makes humans dangerous." Lysera squeezed his hand in return. "And that's why I chose you," she said simply. "Because together we can change the galaxy." The sun disappeared completely, leaving the stars to shine brightly above. For the first time in a long time, the galaxy felt alive, filled with possibility. They had faced fear, defied an empire, and found freedom. And together they would continue to light the way, proving that courage, hope, and heart could triumph against any force, even the mightiest empire.